Welcome back, everybody, to
Welcome back.
Cooperative Conversations, Dark Souls 2. We're at Majula, we escaped the tutorial zone, and I'm going to talk to this lady who's, I know nothing about.
Are you the next monarch? Or merely a pawn of fate? Bearer of the curse, I will remain by your side till this frail hope shatters. Take this with you. May it ease your journey. Go on and see the king. He who made Drangleic what it once was. He who peered at the essence of the soul. King Vendrick.
Oh, it's the Emerald Herald. I should mention, perhaps I should have done that earlier. I have
Bearer of
300
the
hours
curse,
in this game
seek
before
misery.
this. I've beaten
For
the
misery
game
will lead you to
6 or
greater,
7
stronger
times.
souls.
Reckon really likes Souls
You
games.
will never
I
meet
do,
king
even
with a
the
soul
one
so
I don't
frail
like
and
the
pallid.
most, which is this one.
Seek those whose names are unutterable.
I mean,
Um,
that's...
The four endowed
It's
with
still a good
immense
game,
souls.
it's just
Yeah,
not a great follow-up
Their
to its
souls will serve as
predecessor.
beacons.
this one has some
Once you have found
stark
them,
technical issues
return
that
here to
we'll
me,
get into once we start fighting enemies.
so that hope will not fade
Certain
away.
types of enemies that make it less of a good game
Bearer of
mechanically,
the
but
curse.
the
Seek
changes to
souls.
combat it makes
Larger, more
from
powerful
one are
souls.
largely for the
Seek
better,
the king,
largely
That
for
is
the
the
more
only way.
interesting.
lest
The
this
types
land
of enemies
swallow
you
whole,
fight
as it has
work
so
against
many
that,
others.
as well as the aforementioned technical issues, which we must not forget to bring up.
Ah, yes. So, we are playing the original non-scholar version of Dark Souls 2.
That's correct. This is original release, Dark Souls 2. Came out in 2014. March, April, one of those. And it is the one that, of course, was not tested at all on computers that could run it over 30 frames per second. Which means that when you realize certain things in the game are tied to frame rate, such as active frames where your weapon takes durability damage, running the game at a higher frame rate becomes a detriment very
Who are
quickly.
you? Oh, it doesn't matter. Just
We,
help me
we
open
elected
this door.
for this to play this version
I packed my
because
tools in here.
Reckon already
Seeing
owns
was
it.
vacant,
This is true.
He did not wish to
but
purchase
now
Scholar,
somebody's gone and locked the door.
and this, with all of its DLC,
I'm a
was the same
blacksmith.
price as
I'm
Scholar.
nothing
So it
without
was
my tools.
easy for me to just buy it and play it.
Bring me that key.
Yeah, kudos
Chop,
to
chop.
them for not taking it off the Steam storefront like
I'm
they
a
did Dark
blacksmith.
Souls Prepare to Die
I'm
Edition.
nothing without my tools.
Which,
Yeah,
by the
that-
way, if you weren't aware, you can
Bring
no
me that
longer
key.
purchase.
Chop, chop.
You can only buy the remaster.
I'm a blacksmith.
Yep. No legacy support here. Probably
mean,
actually
like,
talk to the blacksmith. Yep.
Yes, perhaps. Perhaps the remaster is a more functional product that reflects better on the company.
Debatable, but continue.
Well, I mean, you don't need a guy who hacked together a patch in 2 hours after the game released to make it functional.
You don't, but you can also be chain backstabbed to death.
Yeah, and you have experienced some fairly heinous problems with the AI yourself.
I'm not sure if I'm just a crazy person, or if they did actually make tweaks, but the remaster of Dark Souls 1, it feels like the AI is 10 times more aggressive than it ordinarily is.
And I'm watching a playthrough, and things do definitely seem changed in
Hello.
certain
Welcome
back-end
to my shop.
sort of
I'm Morley,
designs.
and I sell armor.
They also took another
sorry.
crack at
Please do have a
online
look at my
balance.
wares.
So let's talk about an elephant in the
could
room for
really
Dark Souls 2
use the
before we harp
business.
on the remaster some more.
If you would be so kind.
Soul memory.
Soul memory, which
came from the
is
West.
That thing
Involved.
that no one likes.
nobody
Have
likes
you been
it
there?
because it makes playing with your
It's a
friends
vibrant
really
place,
difficult.
Vibrant with trade.
It does.
Very competitive.
So in Dark
of
Souls
course.
1,
And you have to
the
grease the wheels to get
cooperative
anywhere.
and, well, the multiplayer
But I didn't have the
level
funding for that,
range
so
was
I left home
calculated
in hopes of
by
striking
your
gold.
soul level,
It's
your
been
current
years since then,
character
and
level, plus or
I've
minus
made very
10
little
levels,
headway.
plus or minus in the same way
I don't even know why I'm
10%
still here.
of your level.
Everything's all run down. and
This
dying.
was easy
It's
to
terrible
manipulate,
for business,
that you could
really.
have a, end game character with fully upgraded items being low enough level to go in and invade people in the first area of the game that has multiplayer accessibility. But it also meant that you could play with your friends very easily by just agreeing on a level to stop
The group
leveling
calling
at.
themselves the Blue Sentinels have gained much power involved.
Dark
Dark
Souls
Souls
2, however,
2
You can't even run a
opted
shop without their blessing.
to have
They claim to be working for the greater
every
good.
soul
It's
you
absolute
gain
hogwash.
contribute to your personal soul memory, which is what the matchmaking is now based off of. Which means your level 1 character
God,
that's
why
gone
the
through the
hell am
game
I
9
here?
times will have the same soul memory as somebody who has put every single point into leveling their character and is level 600 and something. Which means you two could play together just fine. But if you want a level 1 character to play with a newly created level 1 character your friend makes to start Dark Souls 2 for the first time, you can't.
Doesn't work.
Does not work.
Well,
And to wrap this all up, in 3 they had the password system, which circumvented the problem of not being able to play with your friends, and then they had weapon memory, I believe, in 3,
Which
where it
was
simply
fine. It seemed to work just fine.
where the game took the best weapon that you have, including upgrades to it, and used that as a reference point for matchmaking. They included that in the Dark Souls 1 remaster, which is not something they mentioned in any of the material. So if you're unaware, you could find yourself having trouble. Thankfully, they have the password system in the remaster, so you can play with your friends, no problem. But you might find yourself having a hard time finding, random people to summon if you happen to have gotten a Black Knight Greatsword drop on the first try.
Almost normal.
I did not
And
purchase the
enjoying it
remaster. You
these
might notice a
days.
theme here. I do not
There are
purchase
very few places
the
like
remasters
that.
of Souls games.
I
I would
am
100%.
On your commitment.
and
I would
like
100% purchase remasters
was
of the
their
Kingsfield
prison.
series,
you,
so
and now I'm
FromSoft,
here.
if you're listening, I will
You
spend
probably
however
heard
much money
that
you
it
want
was
me to on those
possible to
games.
break the curse here.
That said,
I would also pick them up
That's
because
not
I've never
true
played the
at all.
Kingsfield games.
or maybe like a properly
There's
finished
nothing
Shadow
here for
Tower,
you,
considering the PS1
me,
version was decidedly and obviously unfinished. Have you ever waited 45 seconds to load a character menu?
know
You did
much
every time you
about
wanted to switch out your
souls.
weapon in Shadow Tower because it kept
Even I'm
breaking
not
every 5
certain,
hits.
but I'm told that
From
the
Soft's
So, shall
past
we-
mistakes
Well,
behind us,
it's
let's turn to another of their
Yeah.
past mistakes, which is Dark Souls
anything
2.
living,
Yes.
sentient or
Let
not,
us
supposedly
sortie
has
forth and head
what
for
we
the
call
forest
the
of fallen
curse
giants.
is traceable to
Yeah,
the
I'm
soul.
talking over all these NPCs,
Do you
but
see
here's
what
the
that
game's analog to the
alive,
Crestfallen Knight.
to walk
Something-
this earth.
Something that's
That's
interesting about
the
Dark
real
Souls 2 is it
curse,
hates
right
Dark Souls
there.
1, and it does everything in its
Our
power to
man
avoid
will never
referencing it,
die.
even when it is.
And that's quite a
Which makes it
predicament,
feel kind
really.
of mean-spirited, I always found. Like, here's the Crestfallen Knight from Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1, but he's not. He's different now,
Ah, I think I see your ghost talking to him. Excellent.
possibly. You have Patches, except it's not Patches, it's Pate. He's also a guy in leather armor who uses a spear, but it's not Patches.
Now, see, I noticed he gives you the white sign soapstone. Are we going to move on to forest?
Yes,
now, or are we
I've
gonna-
moved
yeah,
into the
yeah.
linear corridor.
Yeah. Oh yes, we'll talk about that in a moment. I have noticed that Pate gives you the white sign soapstone, and that seems to me like an attempt to fool the player into trusting him, which I find interesting. So this hallway.
This hallway. I'm currently standing in front of a sealed portcullis that leads to nothing, which almost looks like it was supposed to be another path, but was scrapped at some point during development. I don't know if that's the case, but that's the aura it gives off.
Dark Souls 2, there's a lot of things in this game. I noticed even in the first few areas I played through, and I'm sure I will notice going forward. There's a lot of places in Dark Souls 2 that seem like they were planning something, and then they just decided to not do it, either to meet a deadline or who knows? Who can say with these things?
Yeah.
We will talk about targeted hardware eventually.
Well, once we come to the forest, I think it's a good time. But
well,
currently, I'm on my way. I'm in a little cavern here. So
yes,
comparisons to Dark Souls 1 are inevitable, and we've already fallen trapped to it. So let's just continue while we're behind. Dark Souls 1's world is heralded as one of the, if not one of the best created, certainly one of the best put together and realized, because it's quite small, all things considered, but the way it interacts with itself is something to be celebrated. It really is. It's meticulously planned out, and it's just really well made. Lost Izalith notwithstanding.
we don't talk about the later third of the game.
Dark Souls 2, I'm going to go ahead and show my hand. I'm going to start describing these areas as theme park rides. The areas of Dark Souls 2 are theme park rides connected by corridors.
Now,
it might
one
not
could
be...
make an argument.
Okay,
Sorry.
please go ahead.
One could make an argument that is them harkening back to Demon Souls and the beginnings of the series. And I suppose that could be a valid stance, but considering you're following up Dark Souls 1, it kind of feels like a step back, no matter how you interpret it.
Yeah, and Demon Souls, even, each area was very distinct, and it had its own theme, but it was also a much larger area than you'll find in this game. And said area kept going for a very long time, and would... Well, it was its own kind of little bubble. There was Volataria Castle. You could leave any time once you got to the next Archstone, but it kept going. Forest of Fallen Giants is just it's a little woodland area, and then a keep, and then you leave. And go on to the next theme park ride.
It is surprisingly small.
And I think now that I've cleared out the main bunch of hollows before the tree.
Yes, I'm just gonna light the bonfire and go.
Let's talk about what Dark Souls 2 was supposed to look like. Because it wasn't supposed to look like this.
No, when the game was first demoed at E3, and I remember watching that demo, I remember where I was, the game looked more like Dark Souls 3 in terms of visual fidelity. It was very impressive. The environments were densely packed, the lighting was very carefully tailored to create a very... I want to say a dreary mood. Yeah, a mood. I want to say a dreary mood. The game looked great. Then the game released, and it looks less great.
It was revealed that, well, actually everything they showed couldn't be made to work properly on the PS3 and 360. Which I find suspicious, and I really would more chalk that up to inexperience of the other team that was making the game.
Tight deadlines may also be a factor, I
Tight
believe.
deadlines, but the graphics were already in place. And I won't claim to know everything there is to know about like the development pipeline or game development in general. But it seems suspicious that there are many obvious areas in this game that seems to have just had its textures downscaled by about half.
This wood texture. It's great. I'm climbing the ladder.
Yeah, I'm going up
So,
to.
I do actually want to commend the design in this one area, the level design, because this area is designed in such a way that you will see what's going on before you actually have to do anything. By climbing the ladder, you're forced to like look around, which is smart.
Yeah. This area... Many areas in Dark Souls 2 are pretty well constructed.
Unfortunately, the design of the enemies that inhabit them is less well constructed. We'll harp on them as we go by.
Yeah. I'm currently fighting the Hide Knight myself.
I'm making sure to get the archer before I fight the Hide Knight. Scary.
So, something else that is an issue with the game running in a frame rate it shouldn't, is that a lot of enemies seem to have the problem where their attacks do damage to you before the animation completes. And it's not terribly relevant on a lot of enemies, but specifically polearm wielding enemies have that issue very obviously.
The quality assurance team at FromSoft is not great, and I want to say they really have never been great historically, but I don't know, my memory is not excellent. The last Armored Core game I actually remember playing is For Answer, which was not popular, if I remember correctly. So the Hide Knight staggers when you hit him with a heavy attack.
Yeah, he does. It's handy.
There are enemies later that won't, I'm told.
Oh, Skelzor. Only you knew. Is that guy chasing me?
So I just fell victim to something that I'm less than a fan of, and I would like to talk about while I try and get back to the Hide Knight.
Oh dear.
There are a lot of enemies in Dark Souls 2 that will only get up and become active and hostile after you've either spent some time in an area or you've done something very specific within the area. So in that instance, there was a fella, an undead soldier, who just sat there while I fought the Hide Knight and didn't get up until I backed into him, making it so that he could stab me, which opened me up for the Hide Knight to kill me. I'm not a fan of that kind of design, that sort of haha gotcha thing.
Right.
And this game does that more than a few times.
But you must see it promotes awareness.
It promotes memorization, reckon, which is very different from awareness.
Are you telling me it promotes stumbling into an area without being fully aware of what you're up against, only to be made aware rather rudely?
Yes. Yes, I am. I mean, you know, I can sit here and be salty all day. The the long and short of it is I should have known better. I should have seen that corpse on the ground and thought, yeah, he's going to get up and attack me when I walk near him. But I didn't do that, and now I'm paying for it. So let's take care of this archer and then do Hide Knight take 2.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
That's that green saturation. Oh boy. So let's talk about the philosophy of difficulty. I'll do my second attempt at the Hide Knight here.
Alright.
So, people love to buy into the reputation that Dark Souls 1 is a difficult video game.
Yeah.
Which... sorry, one... Yep. Dark Souls 1 is a game that has difficult components, difficult enemies, difficult areas. But, Dark Souls 1 itself did not set out with the intent of making the player miserable. Dark Souls 1 was supposed to... it was supposed to make you feel the same way your player character did. You were supposed to be scared of enemies that were tough. You know, you were supposed to approach them methodically. But many people misconstrued this as, oh, you go into the cemetery from Firelink and the skeletons are difficult. This game's difficult, and if I beat it, that means I'm an accomplished video game playing person.
Right.
Dark Souls 2 bought
Dark
into the
Souls...
hype.
Yeah, as evidenced by a lot of the dialogue you get in the beginning of the game, like, oh, you will die over and over, ha 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 ha. And it's...
Which feeds
it's
back
just a
into
bit...
this ambush gotcha kind of enemy placement.
Yeah.
So yes, Dark Souls difficulty. Your
Dark Souls... I will always describe it this way. Dark Souls 1 is a game that respects the player and their ability to pay attention. Whether or not a player does such a thing is up to them. Barring a couple obvious outliers, the Silver Knight Archers, you know the ones, the 12 Taurus Demon clusterfuck, the Dragon Asses, the Bed of... Lost Izalith, really.
Yeah, well that area was not finished, so that, you know...
There are a couple enemy encounters in Dark Souls 1 that are a little eyebrow-raising, at best. But for the most part, it respects your ability to observe and understand a situation that you're about to put yourself into. And I think that is read as difficulty because a lot of the times games will... They want you to have fun playing them, which, sure, no complaint there. And yes, video games should be some sort of, you know, power fantasy in some regard, whether it's, you know, I get to fight lots of big monsters with a sword as just a guy, or the Kingdoms of Amalur style where you're some superhero, basically. Video games are escapism. When a video game powers down the player or powers up the enemies to be on even ground, that's seen as difficulty, which sometimes it is used as. You'll be doing something and then suddenly, oh, everything's much harder because the enemies hit for the same amount of damage I do, or I suddenly, you know, can't take as many hits and, you know, shrug them off with as much ease.
Something I've mentioned before in this regard to you, Reckon, and I'll state on video, is Devil May Cry 3 has my favorite escalation ever, where the toughest fights in that game are a guy who's just you. He can just do the things you can do.
Right.
And so that's an example of like scaling up an enemy to be on equal footing with the player. Metal Gear Rising did that as well in Jetstream Sam.
Right.
So, as you were saying, sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, that plays nicely into it, because in Dark Souls 1, once you're done fighting the Asylum Demon and you're in Lordran proper, even if you don't fall into the trap of wandering into the graveyard unprepared, it's pretty easy to see that, like, the first enemies you fight, those hollows on the way up to the aqueduct, they're just as dangerous as you are. You kill them in 2 hits, they kill you in 2 hits. But the game makes up for that by having their attacks be pretty telegraphed, by having them have very limited number of attacks. Dark Souls is a very readable game, to its benefit. It wants you to understand what enemies can do after a little bit of observation. It wants you to, step back, watch an enemy come towards you, spend some time dodging around or blocking to observe what its moves are, and then react accordingly. Learn the openings, etc., etc., etc. And
Dark Souls 2...
yeah, Dark Souls 2.
less
Dark Souls
that.
2 knows that's what it was supposed to do, and messes it up a lot of the time, unfortunately.
I drew this comparison in our failed recording, so I'll bring it up again. It feels like the difference between playing, say, a tabletop role-playing game, like, say, Dungeons & Dragons or GURPS or something like that. It feels like the difference between having a dungeon master who wants to challenge the abilities of your characters, versus having a dungeon master who is trying to actively kill your characters.
Right.
Because both of those are challenging, but along a different axis.
Yeah.
Just level up my adaptability here.
Yeah, I think now's a decent enough time to call it. I've gone
Yes.
through a little bit of the downstairs from the bonfire.
I have not. I went back to Majula.
Yeah, I went back to Majula to hand in my Estus Flask shard that I forgot to give earlier, but I'm in front of the fog gate leading out to the rampart. So I'm going to stop my recording here, and I'll give you some time to catch up.
I'm very slow and methodical, as we just established.
That's fine. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks for
in
listening
this
to our
episode.
rant.
Yeah, we'll continue our pseudo-philosophical jackass musings next time on Cooperative Conversations, Dark Souls 2.
Hope to see you then.